Have you ever wondered exactly what your child needs to learn to become a strong, confident reader? It's not just about reading more books or memorizing sight words. There are 5 key reading skills every reader must master. And if even one of them is missing, then reading will be frustrating. Today, I'll break them down and give you simple ways to support your child at home. Let's start with skill 1, phonemic awareness. So phonemic awareness is the ability to hear and work with individual sounds in words before letters even comes into play. So it is hearing a word like cat and understanding that that has 3 sounds in it, splitting those sounds up into k, a, t, being able to manipulate one of those sounds, like change the k to h, and now the word becomes hat. This is one of the strongest predictors of future success in reading, and it is an area that you do not want to miss out on. In my freebie 5-minute reading fixes, I give you several phonemic awareness activities that you can do with your child. And you can grab that in the description below. The second skill is phonics. And you may be thinking, well, duh. Phonics is when we connect the sounds to the letters. So first you have to have that phonemic awareness to be aware of the sounds and to understand the sounds. And then we bring in the letters to connect that sound to the letter that represents that sound. That's phonics. And a lot of phonics instruction doesn't make that connection. We're teaching sounds, we're teaching letters, and maybe we're teaching sometimes like A says ah, but we don't teach all the spelling patterns for the sounds. We just do letters and sounds. This letter makes this sound and this letter makes this sound. But what about sounds that are spelled with multiple letters? That's where phoneme graphing mapping comes into play, and you really want to focus on the 44 sounds of English and the letters that represent those sounds. So phonics teaches your child that letters represent the sounds that we hear in words. For example, in a word map, we have m, a, p, and it's spelled M-A-P. So phonics should be taught explicitly and in a very clear sequence, starting with simple sound letter patterns and building towards more complex ones. So if you need a scope and sequence, it is inside my Science of Reading Quick Start Guide freebie. Now the third skill is fluency, and fluency means reading accurately, smoothly, and with expression. So you don't sound like a robot when you're reading, or you're not reading so labored that it's very slow and doesn't sound natural, like natural language. When your child reads fluently, they focus less on decoding and more on understanding what they're reading. So that will eventually lead to comprehension. If they're spending so much time decoding the words on the page, they're not going to get that fluency and understanding. So you can build fluency by rereading familiar books with your child, by doing read-alouds together, and actually listening to fluent reading is a really good way for students to build their fluency because they know what to work towards. Practicing decoding regularly, so there's lots of phonics decoding activities that you can do, and decodable books like these Charged Mommy books that I talk about all the time, really great to use for that. I recommend word mapping templates and fluency grids or fluency strips to really focus in on the phonics and fluency aspects of reading skills. And both of those are in my shop. You can also get a free word mapping template inside my freebies library. All of that stuff is linked below. One of my favorite things to do for fluency is to give fluency grids that focus on specific phonics skills. So let's say your child is working on CVC words, you can assign them to read fluency grids that have only CVC words on them. If they are practicing R-controlled vowels, then you can give them fluency grids specifically for R-controlled vowels. And this is targeted practice where they're decoding words that they know how to decode, but they're trying to read a little more faster and with a little more fluency and expression, and so they work really well for that. The fourth skill is vocabulary. And this is because strong readers really need to understand the words that they are reading. So not only do they need to decode the words and sound them out and blend them correctly, but they need to understand what the word means so that they can understand what it is that they're reading. And there's so many really easy ways to build our children's vocabulary. So some things that you can do are daily read alouds, conversations about new words, relating words to your child's real life experiences. This is a big one. Learning about more things through podcasts, experiences like going to different places, going to museums, traveling, reading books together, watching movies and documentaries. All of these mediums will give our children exposure to ideas and content that naturally will teach them words. And they may ask, oh, what does this mean? That's when you can go in and you can really do a little bit of a deep dive on vocabulary. But if you're using it as more of a learning experience, you want to pull out some of those complex words and pre-teach them and give them that vocabulary awareness. The more words that your child understands, the stronger their comprehension will be, and the only way to expose them to more words is to expose them to more content. So reading more books, listening to more books, talking about different ideas and topics, and just having a lot of conversations and discussions with them. All right, the last skill is comprehension, and this is the final skill. It brings everything together, and it means understanding and making meaning from what we have read. Now, we cannot get to this point if there is a deficit in one of the other areas, right? If they cannot read fluently, if they do not have the vocabulary, if they cannot decode the words, right? If there's a deficit in any of those areas, they're not going to have any comprehension. So you can't jump to teaching comprehension strategies if the foundation is not there. So you need to go back to what it is that there's a deficit in and focus on that first. The comprehension will come naturally. So here's some quick ways that you can practice comprehension now, even if your child does have a deficit in some of those areas, because we can still build listening comprehension and language comprehension, which transfers over to text. So ask things like what happened in the story, whether it's a book you read, a story you listened to, a movie you watched. This is a really good way to build that way to make a connection and talk about something that they have read or listened to. Ask why a character did a certain thing, or maybe what would you have done in that character's situation. Put them in the place so they can relate personally to the story. You can ask how they think the story will end if you haven't finished it, right? Making predictions is a really great skill. Now, remember that comprehension is going to depend on all these other skills. So if you have them reading something where they were really labored in their reading, they may not be able to answer these questions. So I suggest that you do this with text that they can read fluently. Probably that would be decodable text for a struggling reader or a beginning reader, or based on movies that they have watched or something that they have listened to, maybe an audiobook, a story you've read aloud, something like that would be easier to work on these skills. All right, so if you're not sure where to start, I have 2 freebies for you that are linked in the description below. I have the 5-minute reading fixes that gives you simple daily practice ideas. And I have a reading skills roadmap that can help you see exactly where your child is, what reading phase they're in, and how these skills fit together. I also have tons of resources in my shop. A lot of stuff is really affordable, printable, and digital resources that you can use in your lessons. And I will always recommend the Thriving Reader Starter Kit as a great place to build that foundation and have at least a bare minimum in your literacy lesson of covering these 5 areas and building that foundation so your child can become a fluent reader. Now, if you want your child to be really confident with sounding out words, then you want to watch this video next. How to help your child sound out words without tears or frustration. You'll learn exactly what to say, what not to say, and strategies to make decoding easier.